the edge of all that is rational and palpable for the human mind. This is where the cosmos closes the door on the veil of civility you have woven to maintain your sanity. Here there be dragons and more. Here there be the ones waiting for their moment in the stars, when the brutal blasts of supernovas announce their return and the endless darkness of black holes consume the last of your pathetic species. Bow down to the cosmic forces you will never comprehend without the aid of madness. Bow down and respect your elder gods.
When mankind ventured out into space, we never suspected what was to come. Our first inhabited planet was less than 30 light years away, far closer than we would have thought. The issue? Everyone was dead. The entire planet was like that. A perfectly stable world with no issues we could determine, and yet it seems like the suicide rates were the greatest cause of death among the people. We don't know why, but they apparently had been doing this for some time. Years of study later showed that the reptile-like race had taken nearly 10 times as long as we did to reach the industrial age, and had not gotten very far beyond that. Time went on, and we soon discovered that this was not an isolated occurrence. Species after species had killed each other and themselves off for one reason or another. Some had died off so early, only a few stone monuments marked that they had ever been there. Some had established empires spanning nearly a dozen systems. But always, they were all dead, down to the last child. And so we travelled the stars, colonizing the lost homeworlds we found, along with others. We studied the creatures on many worlds, although none bore intelligent life. In time, we studied the technology of the more advanced dead races, gleaming a scientific secret or two we had missed. It was rather amusing to see the scientific community collectively slap their heads when they see the simple ideas and concepts they had missed. Once, and just once, we found a sentient race still alive. On a planet with 3/4 the gravity of Earth, a planet primarily dominated by jungles bore a race of insect-like scavengers. They were barely beyond the Stone Age, farming and agriculture still in its early days. We considered making contact, but in the end decided against it. They were a very violent race, and many would kill one another for the smallest detail. Suicide also seemed to be something they would resort to with little or no good reason. In fact, the entire race seemed insane. Long-term observations show that after hatching, the individual would slowly but surely go insane, to the point where none reached old age. In fact, the only reason this race had not yet gone extinct is a combination of high birth rates, short lifespans, and a child being able to defend itself hours after birth. In any other race, this bizarre affliction can and did drive them to extinction. For nearly 700 years, mankind grew and expanded. We did not find another living race during that time, or find out how we were immune. Many came up with theories, but none fit better than any others. Ethnic, religious, and cultural differences became less important when you were away from Earth. And in the end, those who could not agree simply lived on different worlds. The UTA, United Terran Alliance, controlled over 87% of mankind's colonies from its seats of power on Earth. A few rogue factions cropped up. Piracy and smuggling saw a rebirth in this new space age, and mankind went on as it always had. Then, a moment that would change our history came. The UTA Dreadnought Supremacy was in essence a city in space, constructed with our most advanced technology, to the point where systems were updated during construction, and having a length of nearly 7 miles, it was the mightiest ship we had ever created. The Supremacy was sent to investigate a new world our long-range sensors show had space-age technology upon it. It was farther out than we had ever travelled before, but not by much. It was assumed that this would be just another dead world, that we might find some usable raw materials pre-harvested in the form of abandoned constructions in orbit. What we found was an outpost of a space-faring race. Its people still alive and well. Dozens of ships were in orbit around a rocky, empty world, along with a space dock to repair and refuel them. They were remarkably primitive compared to our own, and much smaller. The largest was perhaps the length of a football field, if that. From the scarring and damage, along with a derelict ship floating nearby of a different make, they had been fighting not too long ago. Our first contact did not go so well, however. We would later piece together what happened, and it went something like this. As soon as what might have, at the time, been the largest spaceship in the galaxy appeared on top of them, the race known as Kondar was sent into the edge of panic. The commander tried to keep a disaster from occurring and ordered his ships not to open fire. Communications on both sides failed. We ourselves had long ago stopped carrying any equipment or training our crew for first encounters, and apparently the Kondar had not had any first encounters of their own in hundreds of years. It also didn't help that our subspace communications were just advanced enough that the garbled words the poor Kondar picked up on their outdated systems sounded horribly sinister and alien, even by the wide standards of the galaxy as it is now. One of the Kondar gunmen on the closest ship had a panic attack after hearing our garbled transmission. He fired upon the Supremacy, which in a placating gesture had lowered its shields. The shot was able to breach the hull in a single moment and cost the lives of 3 crewmen. The captain of the Supremacy ordered the shields raised and a warning shot fired. Unlucky for the Kondar, the concept of warning shots was alien to them, and they did not stop to ask why the single shot had missed. It was a short-range fight. The Supremacy blew away a single craft to secure its escape victor, a sad but necessary tactic. This only hurt our reputation further with what happened later. As we soon discovered, nearly 3% of the galaxy was part of what was known as the Veil of Madness. Any race within this sector of space would slowly but surely go insane. Short jaunts were safe enough, but more than that and permanent damage to the mind would result. We had apparently been sitting in the galactic equivalent of the Bermuda Triangle and had finally breached its edge. When the Kondar realized that both our entrance and escape vectors led directly into the Veil, a panic started. With surprising speed, news spread among their people and among others of what had happened. The story grew worse with each retelling, especially once it left official military reports. Tales of the titanic black ship that came from beyond the Veil sent out signals in a horrid dark language, obliterated dozens of the Kondar's finest warships in seconds for no reason, and then vanished like a ghost, soon spread everywhere. Humanity had become the bogeymen of the universe. Raids from pirate groups further cemented our dark reputation, and in time, we came to work with the role. Every attempt to convince people that we wanted fair negotiations was seen as deception. Rather than fight a losing battle, we played the role given to us. Soon, we were seen as wicked, but not that unreasonable, and gained both fear and reputation throughout the galaxy. Few humans appeared in the view of aliens outside of deliberately frightening power armor, and human ambassadors used voice synthesizers to sound like that first, garbled communication had. Looking back, it's actually worked out in our favor. After years of contact, most alien races know almost nothing about humans other than exaggerated horror stories. They rarely bother us, and the ones that do never return home. The only bit of info we were more than happy to share with them was the reason we can live in the Veil. Turns out, we are all a little crazy to start with. I think the fact that we're pulling the largest practical joke in the galaxy was already proof enough of that.
When age fell upon the world, and wonder went out of the minds of men, when grey cities reared to smoky skies tall towers grim and ugly, in whose shadow none might dream of the sun, or of spring's flowering meads, when learning stripped earth of her mantle of beauty, and poets sang no more save of twisted phantoms seen with bleared and inward-looking eyes. When these things had come to pass, and childish hopes had gone away forever, there was a man who travelled out of life, on a quest into the spaces, whither the world's dreams had fled. Of the name and abode of this man but little is written, for they were of the waking world only. Yet it is said that both were obscure. It is enough to know that he dwelt in a city of high walls, where sterile twilights reigned, and that he toiled all day among shadow and turmoil, coming home at evening to a room whose one window opened not on the fields and groves, but on a dim court, where other windows stared in dull despair. From that casement, one might see only walls and windows, except sometimes, when one leaned far out and peered aloft at the small stars that passed. And because mere walls and windows must soon drive to madness a man who dreams and reads much, the dweller in that room used night after night to lean out and peer aloft to glimpse some fragment of things beyond the waking world and the greyness of tall cities. After years, he began to call the slow-sailing stars by name, and to follow them in fancy when they glided regretfully out of sight, till at length his vision opened to many secret vistas, whose existence no common eye suspects. And one night, a mighty gulf was bridged, and the dream-haunted skies swelled down to the lonely watcher's window, to merge with the close air of his room, and make him a part of their fabulous wonder. There came to that room wild streams of violet midnight, glittering with dust of gold, vortices of dust and fire, swirling out of the ultimate spaces, and heavy with perfumes from beyond the worlds. Opiate oceans poured there, litten by suns that the eye may never behold, and having in their whirlpools strange dolphins and sea nymphs, of unrememberable deeps. Noiseless infinity eddied around the dreamer, and wafted him away without even touching the body that leaned stiffly from the lonely window. And for days not counted in men's calendars, the tides of far spheres bear him gently to join the dreams for which he longed, the dreams that men have lost. And in the course of many cycles they tenderly left him sleeping on a green sunrise shore, a green shore fragrant with lotus blossoms and starred by red camelotes.
You are listening to truly independent radio, KBGA Missoula.
For the most wild, yet most homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburthen my soul. From infancy, my tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals, and was indulged with a great variety of pets. In manhood, I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. My wife, observing my partiality for domestic pets, lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat, a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite playmate, and attended me wherever I went about the house. Our friendship lasted for several years, during which my character, through the instrumentality of the fiend, Intemperance, experienced a radical alteration. I grew moody, irritable, regardless of the feelings of others. I used intemperate language to my wife. I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, I retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him. But at length, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home much intoxicated, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. When I had slept off the night's debauch, I experienced remorse for the crime, but it was a feeble, equivocal feeling. The cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but fled in at my approach. I was at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once loved me, but this feeling soon gave place to irritation. And then came, as if to my final overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. The longing to do wrong, for wrong's sake only, urged me to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Hung it, with tears streaming from my eyes and the bitterest remorse at my heart. That night, I was aroused from sleep by the cry, "Fire! Fire!" The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife and myself made our escape. The destruction was complete. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was a compartment wall, against which had rested the head of my bed. About this wall, a dense crowd were collected, examining a particular portion with minute and eager attention. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas-relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. There was a rope about the animal's neck. The cat had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been filled by the crowd, by one of whom The animal must have been cut from the tree and thrown through an open window into my chamber, probably with the view of arousing me from sleep. The falling of other walls had compressed the victim into the fresh plaster, the lime of which had then, with the flames, accomplished the portraiture. Although I thus accounted for the startling fact, for months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look for another. One night as I sat in a den of more than infamy, my attention was drawn to some object reposing upon one of the immense hogsheads of gin or rum. It was a black cat, a gigantic cat. This cat had a large, indefinite splotch of white covering the breast. When I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once. I soon found dislike arising within me, its evident fondness for myself, disgusted and annoyed. By degrees, these feelings rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature. Gradually, I came to look upon it with loathing. What added to my hatred of the beast was the discovery the morning after I brought it home that, like Pluto, it also had been deprived of one of its eyes. Its partiality for myself, however, seemed to increase. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair, or spring upon my knees, covering me with caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and nearly throw me down. My wife had called my attention more than once to the white hair which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. This mark had been indefinite, but by slow degrees it had assumed a distinct outline. It was now the representation of an object that I shudder to name, of a hideous, of a ghastly thing, the gallows. I was wretched. Neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of rest. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the latter, I started from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face, from the ungovernable outbursts of a fury to which I now abandoned myself. My uncomplaining wife was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the stairs, and nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe, I aimed a blow at the animal which would have proved fatal, but this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot. I set myself forthwith to the task of concealing the body. I could not remove it from the house without the risk of being observed by the neighbours. I thought of cutting the corpse into fragments and destroying them by fire. I deliberated about casting it in the well. Finally, I determined to wall it up in the cellar. The cellar walls had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection caused by a fireplace that had been filled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I could readily displace bricks, insert the corpse, and wall the whole up so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while with little trouble I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. When I had finished, the wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. My next step was to look for the beast. I had resolved to put it to death. But it appeared that the crafty animal, alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, had fled the premises. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. Upon the 4th day of the assassination, a party of police came into the house and proceeded to make rigorous investigation of the premises. Secure in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment. The officers bade me accompany them. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, they descended into the cellar. My heart beat as calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. The police, satisfied, prepared to depart. I burned to say but one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. Oh, by the by, gentlemen, I said as the party ascended the steps, this is a very well-constructed house. In the rabid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. These walls are solidly put together. Here, through mere bravado, I tapped heavily with a cane upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of the wife of my bosom. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence, and I was answered by a voice from within the tomb. A cry, at first muffled and broken, like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, continuous scream, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of hell. Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant, the party upon the stairs remained motionless. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. The corpse, greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood before the spectators. Upon its head, with red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb.
hot foot bottom around my door, all around my door. You think a hot foot bottom around your daddy's door. It keeps me with rambling mind right on. Every old place I go, every old place I go. I can tell the wind driving, the leaves swimming on the tree, swimming on the tree. I can tell the wind is driving, leaves swimming on the tree. All I need, my little sweet woman, and to keep my company. My company.
In the dead of night, when the moon is high and the ill winds blow, and the banshees cry, and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
yourself in the midst of a nightmare from which you cannot awaken. You find yourself giving over to the gods lurking in the pitch of outer space, sharpening their teeth for the feast they shall make of your flesh. Heed the words of the ancients, and do as the mighty ones command. Kneel, my children, and respect your elder gods.
What are dreams? What are they really? Are they bits and pieces of memories thrown together without design or purpose? Do they whisper secrets of future days to come, or hide secrets from days long past? Perhaps our soul is expelled from our bodies each night, thrust out into the void, traveling to wondrous lands and beyond the limits of our physical form. Consider this. Is it possible that our dreams are more than mere nonsense, but premonitions of adventures not yet had? Honestly, I don't have any answers for you. However, if I may, I would like to share with you what I do know. Tell me, have you ever had a dream you felt was so real, your waking life felt distant and dull? Have you ever dreamt a dream that reveals glimpses of your full potential? Do you know of any dreams that fill you with such sorrow upon waking each morning, to desire with all your might that your eyes might open to a brand new life, yet never does it come? With every rising sun, that is the burden I bear. However, such sadness does not consume me, for I know my dreams are so much more than simple desires and wishful thinking. They are more than you could possibly imagine. For you see, my dreams are preparing me for great things to come. I know that to be the truth. No, rolling your eyes does not offend me. You are not the first I've tried to tell. You are not the first to have mocked my words. Most simply laugh out of amusement, and others feign looks of pity towards me. Truly, in their view, only a disadvantaged child would entertain such nonsense in their heads, for they are only capable of seeing a land of make-believe, a fairy tale fabricated from the mind of a child, so sure of themselves that a child orphaned as an infant, who never knew the embrace of a mother's love or guidance of a father, could hold his head high. Nor would they consider such a waif would earn his success with only the determination of his heart and by the strength in his hands. Yet, I hold no malice, for their conclusions are not without logic, albeit sadly short-sighted. That is all about to change, for tomorrow is the day when all will be revealed. For tomorrow is my birthday, and when I am gone, they will have no other choice but to admit they were wrong. Tomorrow is the day my dreams foretold. Before the sun sets on your 5 and 10th year of life, you shall return with hope and salvation on your back and light in your hands. By your blade, you will rid the land of the worm. That is what I see every night when I surrender to sleep. Close your eyes and take my hand, and let me tell you about my dreams. In my dreams, there's a realm so close to our own that only a width of hair separates the two, existing side by side, together and unaware of one another. Yet they are so far apart that traveling the distance would take 1,000 years. It is a medieval realm where science and magic live next to each other as beloved friends. Machines and technology, sorcery and magic, they coexist side by side as one. No difference comes to mind in matters of wizarding and engineering, sorcerers and teachers, or even the healer and a doctor. This realm is ruled by 6 great nations, each under a king and queen of virtuous heart and noble blood. Castles and villages, farms and towns pepper the land. All live simplistic lives with a hint of technologies, both natural and mystical. In my dreams, I see a beautiful domed temple made from ivory white stone. The temple is the home of 6 sacred weapons made of enchanted steel, one given to each nation by a goddess. She offered these weapons in preparation for the day foretold, the day of the worm. The weapons are wielded by a warrior from each nation, each personally chosen by the goddess herself, but in the center of the temple, in the most revered spot, sits the 7th altar. Upon this altar rests the armor and weapons of the 7th son of a 7th son. Under the darkness of an eclipse of 3 moons, a child's bloodline emerged from the joining of a mortal and a god. This child's spirit will unite the realms in their darkest hour. The weapons are enchanted steel of silver and blue, and my armor is impossibly light. My gauntlet is for my right hand and serves as my shield. It houses a disc that 3 blades emerge from with a snap. When flung, it obeys my will and lays waste to all of my foes. It then faithfully returns to my hand without fail every time. My sword was forged from the last remnants from creation and cooled with the very essence of life. It is the mortal enemy of rot and decay. It can never be broken. Nothing can shatter its blade, and it is impervious to impact. Never will its edge be dulled. The jewel in its hilt is my symbol and banner. It is the eye that shines a light that can ignite the passion of an oppressed people when hope has seemed to be lost. In my dreams, I see a day in which black rain falls from the sky. Viscous, ropey strands of greenish-black tar pour from the clouds. Anything it touches immediately begins to decay and corrode. The arrival of the worm is heralded by a clap of thunder as his fortress bursts through the clouds. It pierces the land like a dagger stabbed into flesh upon impact with the land. The castle of the worm is a jagged and pointed crystalline citadel with bulbous blister-like domes upon it. This is the throne from where the worm will conquer and reign. The decay spreads from the dark fortress in the form of black molds and writhing masses of tentacles and tendrils, rotting everything it touches except for one thing: the dead. Every warlord needs its pawns. The dead are absorbed and used as vessels for the worm's decay to take form. They are the eyes, the foot, the iron fist of the worm. The worm fills its ranks with the deceased and slain flesh of the surrounding villages with a gluttonous appetite. The blisters from the walls of its fortress are then released, and its army of decayed and mindless drones carry the smelly, rotting mass into the heart of all 6 nations. It will plant itself into the ground and become extensions of the mind and will of the worm. From here, it will wage war against every man, woman, and child. It will fight with the decomposing faces of their neighbors, friends, brothers, and sisters. In my dreams, I see the goddess blessing the 6 kings from each nation before spiriting away the 7th set of armor and weapons from the walls of the vulnerable temple. She hides the items in a place far from the worm's reach, where they will wait until claimed by the child foretold to come. In a final act of sacrifice, I see the goddess exhausting the last of her immortality in order to open the door of light. She places a tiny infant within the entrance, and before closing the door, she says with tears in her eyes, "Goodbye, my beloved. Goodbye, my son." It is 20 minutes to midnight, the day of my 15th birthday. I sit on the wooden floor, and I am trembling next to a heated stove. I tremble not from the cold, but from a heart-gripping fear. However, make no mistake, do not think for a moment I am trembling out of fear of the unknown or of things to come. I'm not afraid of marching against a grotesque army of 1,000 rotting corpses. I don't fear the violence I will encounter or the many battles I will fight. I am not afraid. No, none of that scares me. I want the life so much. Do you want to know what really scares me? What has filled me with such terror and dread? What scares me the most is this. I'm so afraid that when tomorrow finally comes, it will come and go like any other ordinary day.
The change occurred before he could divest himself of more than his coat and scarf. He had only to step out of the shoes, to shed the socks with 2 backward kicks, and shuffle off the trousers from his lean hind legs and belly. But he was still deep-chested after the change, and his shirt was harder to loosen. His hackles rose with rage as he slewed his head around and tore it away with hasty fangs in a flurry of falling buttons and rags. Tossing off the last irksome ribbons, he regretted his haste. Always heretofore he had been careful in regard to small details. The shirt was monogrammed. He must remember to collect all the tatters later. He could stuff them in his pockets and wear the coat buttoned closely on his way home when he had changed back. Hunger snarled within him, mounting from belly to throat, from throat to mouth. It seemed that he had not eaten for a month of months. Raw butcher's meat was never fresh enough. It had known the coldness of death and refrigeration, and had lost all vital essence. Long ago there had been other meals, warm and sauced with still spurting blood. But now the thin memory merely served to exasperate his ravening. Chaos raced within his brain. Inconsequently, for an instant, he recalled the first warning of his malady, preceding even the distaste for cooked meat, the aversion, the allergy to silver forks and spoons. It had soon extended to other objects of the same metal. He had cringed even from the touch of coinage, had been forced to use paper and to refuse change. Steel, too, was a substance unfriendly to beings like him, and the time came when he could abide it little more than silver. What made him think of such matters now, setting his teeth on edge with repugnance, choking him with something worse than nausea? The hunger returned, demanding swift appeasement. With clumsy pads he pushed his discarded raiment under the shrubbery, hiding it from the heavy-jowled moon that peered down like a glutted vampire. It was the moon that drew the tides of madness in his blood and compelled the bestial metamorphosis. But it must not betray to any chance passer the garments he would need later, when he returned to human semblance after the night's hunting. The night was warm and windless, and the woodland seemed to hold its breath, apprehending the presence of such as he. There were, he knew, other monsters abroad in that year of the 21st century. The vampire still survived, subtler and deadlier, protected by man's incredulity. And he himself was not the only lycanthrope. His brothers and sisters ranged unchallenged, preferring the darker, urban jungles, while he, being country-bred, still kept the ancient ways. Moreover, there were monsters unknown as yet to myth and superstition. But these too were mostly haunters of cities. He had no wish to meet any of them, and of such meeting surely there was small likelihood. He followed a crooked lane, reconnoitered previously. It was too narrow for cars, and it soon became a mere path. At the path's forking, he ensconced himself in the shadow of a broad, mistletoe-blotted oak. The path was used by certain late pedestrians who lived even farther out of town. One of them might come along at any moment. Whimpering a little, with the hunger of a starved hound, he waited. He was a monster that nature had made, ready to obey nature's first commandment. Thou shalt kill and eat. He was a thing of terror, a fable whispered around prehistoric cavern fires, a miscegenation allied by later myth to the powers of hell and sorcery. But in no sense was he akin to those monsters beyond nature, the spawn of a new and blacker magic, who killed without hunger and without malevolence. He had only minutes to wait before his tensing ears caught the far-off vibration of footsteps. The steps came rapidly nearer, seeming to tell him much as they came. They were firm and resilient, tireless and rhythmic, telling of youth or of full maturity untouched by age. They told, surely, of a worthwhile prey, of prime, lean meat and vital, abundant blood. There was a slight froth on the lips of the one who waited. He had ceased to whimper. From pads to jaws, from hackles to tail, he grew taut for the anticipated leap. The path ahead was heavily shadowed. Dimly, moving fast, the walker appeared in the shadows. He seemed to be all that the watcher had surmised from the sound of his footsteps. He was tall and well-shouldered, swinging with a lithe sureness, a precision of powerful tendon and muscle. His head was a faceless blur in the gloom. He was hatless, clad in dark coat and trousers such as anyone might wear. His steps rang with the assurance of one who has nothing to fear and has never dreamt of the crouching creatures of darkness. Now he was almost abreast of the Watcher's covert. The Watcher could wait no longer, but sprang from his ambush of shadow, towering high upon the stranger as his hind paws left the ground. His rush was irresistible, as always. The stranger toppled backward, sprawling and helpless, as others had done, and the assailant bent to the bare throat that gleamed more enticingly than that of a siren. It was a strategy that had never failed. Until now. The shock, the consternation had hurled him away from that prostrate figure and had forced him back upon teetering haunches. It was the shock, perhaps, that had caused him to change again, swiftly, resuming human shape before his hour. As the change began, he spat out several broken lupine fangs, and then he was spitting human teeth. The stranger rose to his feet, seemingly unshaken and undismayed. He came forward in a rift of revealing moonlight, stooping to a half-crouch, and flexing his beryllium steel fingers enameled with flesh pink. "Who? What are you?" quavered the werewolf. The stranger did not bother to answer as he advanced. Every synapse of the computing brain transmitting the conditioned message translated into the simplest binary terms. Dangerous, not human, kill.
You are listening to Truly Independent Radio, KBGA Missoula, 89.9 on your FM dial and on the World Wide Web.
ever feel as if you couldn't breathe? Your tongue is thick in your mouth, your throat is hoarse, your lungs are bursting for air. It seems as if the walls of your room are closing in on you, crushing you, crowding you, sealing you off from the rest of the world. And then you awake. It's only been a ghastly dream, a terribly vivid nightmare. But with your eyes open and your hands trembling and your body bathed in perspiration, you relax. At least you're in your own room, safe. And it was only a dream. Or was it? This is a tale that the inmates of Bell Prison still whisper in the cell yards and corridors to this day. The story of John Day, a lifer, and his weird nocturnal dreams. It happened long ago, but Cell 13, where it began, still enjoys its haunted history. Listen, and I'll tell you about John Day and his nightmares. One night at 12 midnight, the stone and steel corridors of Row A rang with the hoarse, terrible shouts of a man screaming for the guards. The prisoners, so rudely awakened, would normally have grumbled and yelled their annoyance, but something in the horrible moans and sobbings issuing from Cell 13 stilled their tongues. The guards rushed to the cell and swung it open to find John Day crouched in the corner on the floor by his bed, now whimpering and crying, his hands to his throat. At the sight of the guards, he blurted about his nightmare. "The hands," he babbled, "the hands. Thick, calloused, lumpy hands. They were choking me." "Oh, just a nightmare," the guards laughed. But that wasn't the end of it. It was only the beginning of many nights when Row A would be similarly disturbed. John Day and his nightmare about someone strangling him became the talk of Bell Prison. And John Day himself, sentenced to life imprisonment, grew steadily thinner and paler. The warden refused to listen to his pleas for another cell. He wouldn't cater to the whims of convicts. The prison doctor insisted that John Day was only shamming because other than a loss of weight, he was organically and mentally sound. But still the nightmare persisted, and John Day's nocturnal outcries became a familiar sound that the prisoners accepted as another rigor of their hard existence. But one night came a new sound. The escape sirens wailed over the yard. John Day had escaped, attacked a guard, and gone over the wall. The entire organization of Bell Prison went into action. Guards with bloodhounds scoured the surrounding countryside, and only 2 miles away, one guard with his dog came on a strange sight. A teamster with his heavy wagon pulled over to one side of the road, and lying on the ground, still in his prison uniform, his eyes bulging unnaturally in his head, lay John Day. He was dead. The guard approached the big teamster, a burly giant, and questioned him. The story was simple enough. John Day had halted him with a gun to make use of the wagon, and the teamster had fought back. Luckily, John Day's gun had misfired, and the man had been able to get his hands around his throat. The guard shone his flashlight on the teamster's hands. They were thick, calloused, and lumpy. Big, thorny fingers that had strangled the life out of John Day. Only a nightmare, Bell Prison had thought. Just a convict's curious dream. But when John Day's dead body was returned to the prison morgue, the story of Cell 13 became the terrible tale that it is to this day. And what of your dreams and your nightmares? If you ever imagine that fingers are at your throat throttling you, don't twist and turn. Wake up. Open your eyes. Maybe it's just a dream, but someone could be killing you.
You have been listening to Respect Your Elder Gods on KBGA Missoula with your host, Mr. C. I hope you can join us again next week at this same time for more doom and gloom and sludge and blood and guts and all the other gory details that make life worth dying for. Until then, do remember to watch the skies and study the shadows, and always respect your elder gods.
Close the door, put out the light. No, they won't be home tonight. The snow falls hard, and don't you know? The winds of Thor are blowing cold. They're wearing steel that's bright and true. They carry guns that must get through. Nature's a path where no one side by side with death. Devil mocks their every step. Snow drives back the foot that's slow. The dogs of doom are howling more. They carry news that must get